Just, and James is recording this event, just so that you know, James Eaker. Thank you for all your help, James. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you again for joining us. If you don't know me, my name is Anne Hildreth. I'm a VP at HSB Canada, and also proud to be the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for ORIMS, and also on the RIMS DE&I Council. So before we begin, I wish to acknowledge the lands that I am on. They are the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Cree, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I recognize that we all work and live in different places, and that some of you come from different Indigenous communities and territories, but regardless of where we are all interconnected through the lands that we live on, the water that we use, and the air that we breathe, and we are committed to a journey of continuous learning through allyship. So welcome again. I'm very honored today to introduce to you our guests. We are fortunate to have two preeminent risk managers lead today's lively and informative discussion to recognize and celebrate Black history today and every day. And I just read some comments on LinkedIn by a friend who called it Black Pride Month. And I love that. I think we should adopt that moniker. Love it. So welcome. I want to introduce you to Robert Cartwright Jr., the Division Manager of Environmental Health, Safety and Sustainability for Bridgestone Retail Operations out of Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia. He's responsible for Bridgestone Retail Operations, the Northeast Division, and Robert has been actively involved with RIMS Society and chapter levels for more than 20 years. In fact, Robert was the president of RIMS in 2018, where I had the pleasure of meeting him. And he was also the founder of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council in 2019. He's also an established and very well-respected international speaker on topics such as what we're speaking to today in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also mentorship. That's one of his passions and risk management practices. Welcome, Robert.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Anne.
Great to have you here. And also pleasure to introduce Renee Sims, who is the Vice President, Insurance Corporate at RioCan Real Estate Investment Trust, one of Canada's largest real estate investments trust. She is responsible for managing the insurance program of RioCan's multi-billion-dollar portfolio. As one of RioCan's first and longest standing employees, she uses her knowledge gained from 24 years at the trust to support RioCan's overarching strategy to manage and mitigate risks and drive long-term unit holder value. Renee currently serves on the Risk Managers Executive Council for the Factory Mutual Insurance Company, and is a co-founder and co-chair of a peer-to-peer Risk Managers Roundtable with 24 members from North America's commercial real estate industry. Renee shares our passion for DE&I and is also on the ORIMS DE&I committee with myself and Tara Lassard-Webb. So welcome, Renee. But before I hand it over, I just want to encourage everybody who hasn't seen Renee's posts on LinkedIn. Every day in February, Renee is sharing and celebrating the lives and stories of some truly outstanding and remarkable Canadian Black women. Every day, they're absolutely amazing, wonderful stories. I'm learning so much. I also want to let you know that we'll have a few minutes to the call for some Q&A. So let's jump into this. Renee, I'll hand the mic over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. I want to say thank you for the land acknowledgement as well. You know, it sets the tone for, you know, inclusivity and allyship. So I really always appreciate hearing the land acknowledgement. So thank you for doing that. And also thank you for the introduction. And of course for, you know, touting my LinkedIn post. It's become a labor of love, and also for learning, because I'm learning so much as I go through each one of the individual women that I have researched over the last 3 weeks. So thank you for that. I'm honored to be here with you today. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today as well. And if I can actually ask for one housekeeping, which is, would you mind turning off your mics? I mean, I generally find that I have a very tinny voice, and whenever I'm in a loud room, it gets even more squeaky. And I'm sure nobody wants to hear me squeak on their mic. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, if you can, that would be great. We are here to celebrate, as Anne indicated, Black History Month. And now that we are coming to the end of it, I think it's a great time to reflect on it. The theme for Black History Month this year in Canada is February and Forever, celebrating Black history today and every day. Throughout our history, Black Canadians have played a huge role in making our country what it is today. There are so many stories of resilience, sacrifices, and hope in every sector, from academics to sports, to arts, to politics and beyond. Undoubtedly, the same can be said about Black Americans in the United States. With that said, Robert, can you share with me what Black History Month means to you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Renee. You know, we hear a lot about Black History Month, and especially in the States, is something that has a very high profile. But I think Black History Month used to stand out as something that was something separate. We talk about it and then kind of move on to something else. But when you really get into the whole nitty gritty of it all, I think the idea of what Black history is it kind of tells us where we came from, to see where we're going as a people and as a nation. I think the thing that stands out for me is that there's a lot of history that we don't know about. We know about Martin Luther King, we know about Malcolm X and W.E. Du Bois and folks like that, but we don't know the people who were very creative and who were very instrumental in forming this country, especially in the United States. And I'm not talking about the fact of the slave labor that created the crops and the revenue and the wealth. I'm talking about creativity in reference to things related to elevators, cars, components, and things like that. I mean, every day I'm reading about someone else that I never even knew about, that was very instrumental. Within my company, we're learning about people because we involve tires, but we're learning about people who are in the racing industry. Had no idea. So I think it's a good idea for us to kind of step back and find out that we're not an oppressed society. We're a society that added tremendous contributions, not just the United States, but on the world stage, and even in Canada. So I think Black History Month is great in the sense that we can step back, but I think we need to really spread that information and spread that knowledge because it's limited. And sometimes we talk about it in limited senses and we only talk about it with higher profile people without realizing there's a large amount of folks that are out there that have just done so much. And you and I and everyone else, we're standing on the shoulders of giants who have trailblazed the path before us.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. It's literally the invisible hands that have made the economies move forward and grow into the future. And for me, Black History Month is really and truly sort of shining a light into those areas of history, but also current history. I mean, there are individuals who are continuing to make their mark and move forward to build and give forth to our community as best we can. So, that's why for me, this Canada's celebrating today and forever is really and truly encompasses. This is not about 28 days. This is 365 of them. We've been here, we're still here, and we're going to be here. So it's just every day.
Right.
So switching gears, I want to talk about 2020 was sort of a pivotal year, if you will. And it's so funny how life is cyclical, is that there always seem to be a cycle that returns where there's an uprising of information and unrest that gives light to concerns that may have sort of become complacent. So 2020 was a watershed year for race relations, as we know, especially as it relates to Black people in North America. and dare I say, for the world. Following the death of George Floyd, which fueled that momentum for the Black Lives Matter movement and resulting in demonstrations across the globe, this led to an increased social awareness of racial inequity. Representation of Black people came to the forefront. And in Canada, this was led to the formation of the Black North Initiative, which is a non-profit focused on tackling anti-Black systemic racism in corporate Canada. Black North Initiative quickly became the social justice organization that corporate Canada has chosen to associate itself with. And as a result, many Canadian companies were either forming or had a renewed interest in forming diversity, equity, and inclusion councils and committees. So Robert, for you, what was your aha moment that led you to become engaged in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives?
Yeah, so I think I have to step back a bit and think back just to my job history and thinking about my experience, especially when I started to get into management, because there's not many of us who were in management. I'm going back quite a few years. But I think the aha moment was that there were so many initiatives that were being talked about out there. And when I first started getting involved with RIMS as an organization from the local level on a chapter level with Delaware Valley chapter, and got involved with certain committees with RIMS. As time went on, I saw that there was not much diversity in this organization, which was similar to most organizations. But yet they were committed to making change and to impacting the risk community. So one meeting that we had where they had just the chairs of different committees were invited to meet with the board of directors, and they said, well, what do you think is the next thing that we should be looking at? And I said, well, not much diversity on the board, and I don't see much diversity where we're doing in advertising, and we're saying that we're a global organization, but we don't see that reflected. And they said, oh, that's a great point. So, be careful what you wish for. A few years later, I get a phone call and it says, hey, we'd like you to be on the global board of directors. And so, okay, so that left me with a platform to say, now I can advance some of these thoughts and ideas I have. The idea I had about diversity and equity and inclusion was that it can't be a noun. It can't be something that we talk about. And people still talk about as, we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, or we're going to generate resources, we're going to donate time. That's a noun. It should be a verb, and by now it should have been a verb. And so for me, it was more of saying, let's make this actionable, something that we put in place. And then come my 10 years or so on the board, I was elected to be the president. Well, now I have another platform of which I can, move and advance certain thoughts and ideas. And, the DE&I initiative was something that we examined, and we questioned whether RIMS as an organization was really looking at it in the right way, and we weren't. And we did an internal look, which led to a task force, and that task force led to us creating the DE&I Council in 2019. Now, since then, we've also kind of looked at our partners in the industry. So we looked with connecting with folks like Lewis Towers Watson, Chubb, and the Hartford, and we kind of asked the question, where does the talent pipeline, what does talent look like in 2025, especially not just on the DE&I side, but just from talent by itself. And we had a Talent 2025 survey that we sent out to about 1,000 professionals who gave us insight as so far as what they were looking for. And what they said was, and just in a small snapshot, that DE&I is going to be necessary, especially by 2025. There's a business case for it. We're not talking about checking a box. We're not talking about compliance. We're not talking about making sure we meet a quota. We're talking about making sure that we are diverse and we're bringing in the best of the best. We can only bring in the best of the best if you look outside of your own circle. And so that was the whole idea behind it. So I've seen a lot of collaborations. I think Marsh and Marsh Canada has also collaborated with RIMS. There's different reports, white papers that have come out. I've looked at nothing but reports from companies around the world who basically have said that if we don't make this part of our plan, we will not be profitable
Right.
in the future. So, the business case, I think, is the thing that kind of got me behind it. And in the sense of saying, and I just said this recently, there was a songwriter who said, I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Just open up the door, I'll get it myself. And so the whole idea behind that is that, black people are not looking for a handout.
Right.
They're looking for an opportunity. And so the opportunity comes when organizations start to think outside of the box and say, do we have diverse talent, or do we have people who are outside of people who look like us who have greater ideas? And so I've been advancing that platform. That I continue to advance that platform. That's something I'm very, very passionate about.
Thank you for sharing that. And I picked up on a couple of points you made there about DE&I being a verb. It has to be actionable. Yes. And RioCan started its DEI Council last year, following the events of 2020, the George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter, and then we had this interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I was on the inaugural, one of the council members. And you go through a frenzy of building what would be sort of the 4 pillars. And now you're at that stage where there's this unknown as to how to make it actionable,
Right.
sort of, because it's okay to build framework, but it doesn't walk.
Right.
And so, I wondered, and I don't really want to get too technical into it because it's not really about Renee learning how to build her DEI council.
No, that's fine.
It's about really and truly, like, what is your advice to actually make it actionable?
So I think the thing that when you start talking about making it actionable is we have to talk about the why. Like, why does the organization want to do this? It's great. I see a lot of companies put together DE&I platforms. They have pillars of where it ties in with the CSR of the organization. All those things are great, but you have to have a specific goal. Like, what is your intended goal? What is the desired outcome? Do you want to better the community? Do you want to educate the community? Do you want to educate the next generation that's coming in? Do you want to set specific goals for yourself? For example, it's not just to say we want to have more women or more indigenous people on a board. You want to say that you want to have a percentage of your representation of your organization. So if your organization has a demographic, do you have the representation from a diverse standpoint that represents your community that you serve? So that's the first thing to do. The second thing is find an easy win. Something that you can say that, we put something out there, we have this pillars, we have all these things, we have this framework, but like you say, how do you make this thing drive? Well, you can make it drive, but where are you going? What's the goal? Where do you want to go? So think about where your goal is. So if your goal is, in 3 years, we want to accomplish X, Y, Z, so it's like an X to Y by when equation, then you make this thing actionable. And you can basically say, by starting off with an easy win by saying, hey, we put a framework together, but we need more people to help us get this thing going. Who wants to be involved?
Yeah.
Second thing is you set up your ERGs, or your employee resource groups, and they're going to be your catalyst. I'll tell you, Renee, they will be a catalyst to get things moving forward, because guess what? The best ideas come from the field, right?
Yeah.
And so those are a couple things. We can talk offline about that, but there's so many things that you can do to make this thing a verb. And I talk a lot about that. It's very easy to do, but you have to ask your first question is, why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? Because you can't sustain it if you don't have your why.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And yeah, definitely, I'll probably reach out to you offline. I will tell you is that the company I work for the longest time, I was sort of the only Black person in the organization. And I've been here 24 years. We've changed since then, that it's a much more diverse group of individual. But I find that, as you get past a certain line in the organization, as you get to the executive, into the C-suite, it's not as diverse as, you would hope it to be.
Right.
But so I really want to switch gears now to talk about, the Black experience. Is that you bring in DE&I, and certainly for me, that was an opportunity for my company to start to recognize all of the positives it has done, but also acknowledge that there's a lot of work to be done. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Black experience to me is a multi-dimensional human experience, and there are nuances. our individual experiences are not the same, which obviously can be applied to almost any diverse population in the world. Like every one of us are uniquely different and based on our individual experiences. I recently had a call with one of our regional heads within the organization. And, she wanted to get to know more about the Black experience. And her question to me, which I thought was a bit, I was first taken aback by the question, which was like, what is it that Black people want? And I was looking at it thinking, I don't think it's any different than what you want. But, you realize that it's an invitation, it's an olive branch to have a conversation, because it's really and truly just trying to clear up sort of the fog of misunderstanding. I said to her,
Right.
my experience is obviously very unique, at least from my perspective. For instance, I was born in the Bahamas. I spent most of my formative years there. I immigrated to Canada in my early teens, and it was only then that I became defined as a minority, which, when you're like 12, 13 years old and somebody says you're like the minority in the group, coming from a world where you were 99% of the people looked like you,
Right.
it was quite a tailspin for me. But I can understand and appreciate that there is nuance in my experiences that are different from any other person, any other Black person. But I also understand and appreciate that Black people born in Canada have a very different experience than mine.
Yes.
Same Black people born in the United States in the South, they have a
Hmm.
very different experience than mine. So ultimately for me, the Black person's experience is a human experience. And, each one of us, we define ourselves as human beings. And the human experience is very complex, diverse, and nuanced.
Right.
So what I have to say, Robert, is that, you're an established leader in risk management practices. I know you are a mentor to the next generation, and I'm very happy to meet you, because I think I've made a really great contact, which will help me learn more as I grow.
Mhm.
And as well, you're an ambassador for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Do you think your complex experiences as a Black man has shaped your career path?
I would say absolutely so, and I'll put it to you this way. Sometimes, and I have a lot of friends, white, black, all different nationalities.
Yeah.
A lot of my white friends are CEOs of their companies. We have these detailed conversations, and sometimes they're like difficult conversations because, to your point, someone says, "Well, what do you want?" And I said, "We don't want anything. It's just more of an opportunity."
Mm.
But the experience that I gave to this one gentleman was this. We talked about our childhoods. Both of us came from very poor childhoods. Um, Growing up in very poor areas under a lot of difficult circumstances. I mean, you would never think by looking at him that was the same. I said, but the difference between you and me is this: is that when we both walk up to the door of opportunity, the door will be open to you first. And if I was there in front of you, they would ask me to stand aside and ask me questions where they would just let you walk in. I said, that's the difference. All we're saying, and the same thing for women. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing for women. It's the same thing for a person of a different orientation or different religion. So it's the same thing. So I said, so the key is that my experiences were the fact that when I was growing up, my parents always said, if someone looks at you because of the color of your skin,
Yep.
they're two steps behind you.
Oh
You
my
don't need
God.
to worry about them. So that mindset was something that stayed with me because I faced that opposition through a lot of my management career. And so that is something that has always propelled me and always stood in the back of my mind. So I knew that I didn't have to, if I felt that kind of that feeling, and we all get that feeling.
Mhm.
Okay, they're two steps behind me. I don't need to worry about that. So I say that my experiences, I thought about the fact that someone was watching out for me. Um, in my first promotion, when I became a plant manager, and there was one auditor that said, I knew you were going to get that job. I said, how did you know that? He said, because I watched your work ethic. I watch what you do. He says, people watch what you do. They don't necessarily have to like what you do, but they watch what you do. So that goes back to what my parents said: do the best you can, whatever you do. My grandfather always said to me, "There's nothing you can't do if you put your mind to it." So all those things kind of kind of dovetailed to when I became a manager, which was basically off of a bet. from one of my coworkers and say, "You can't do better than him." Yeah, I can.
Oh,
So it was just more of taking that step and taking that opportunity. So we as a people, what we don't do well is we don't promote ourselves.
mm,
We don't connect with ourselves,
right.
and we don't utilize the network that exists out there. And so, what has propelled me in my career is that because I was able to make it, if you want to use that term, my job is to make sure others do and open up the door for others and to reach back and to mentor. Um, I can't tell you when I was president in 2019, there was so many people that came and said, "Hey, can we talk to you? Can we?" Yeah, absolutely. As many as you can, as many as I can, and I still am in touch with quite a few of them. The thing I challenge them in is this: I want to know where you're at 5 years from now, based off the conversation that we had. I want to know where you're going to be at 5 years from now. You should reach back, and some of them have. So this is all great stuff. But we need to do a better job of that.
Yeah.
Um, there was another conference, and it was for NIA, the National African American Insurance Association. It's based in Atlanta, and this is a group of people. When I was talking with them, I just couldn't believe the firepower that was in the room. Vice presidents, SVPs, CEOs. I just never seen that before, and I said, "Well, let me ask a question. Who knows who you are?" Because I've been around the country and I asked, "Have you heard of Naya?" No. Well, they exist. I said, "So then you folks are Wakanda. You have
Right.
all this wealth, you have all this intelligence, all this creativity, and no one knows who you are. Start marketing." Well, guess what? We did a collaboration with them when I was president with REMS, and brought their executive director to show what we were doing, and they showed us what we were doing, and so we had all this going on. So that's my goal. My goal is, I like to use the expression, connecting the dots. And so that's what shaped my career path. Supporting the next generation in the United States is the Spencer Foundation. In Canada, it's the McGannon Foundation. And I've had a great opportunity to spend a lot of time with the folks up in Canada when I had my portfolio up there. And it's just all great stuff. So I mean, that's really the thing that energizes me, because there's just so much that can be done.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I appreciate that. And by the way, thank you again for introducing me to something new. I didn't know NIAD existed. Did I say that correctly?
NIA, yeah, National African American Insurance Association. They got about 18 chapters across the United States. If you want to tap
Yeah,
into some of the talent pipeline that's there, because I've been encouraging them to reach out a little bit more to
right.
other countries, especially Canada, because we're neighboring, a wealth of information. And folks that you are in contact with on LinkedIn are part of Maya, and you don't even know it.
I honestly, I'm gonna go Google that as soon as I get off this call because now I gotta make contact because life
Yes,
is always about learning and growing, right?
exactly.
So for my side of that, I will add that for me as a Black woman, I can tell you that living the world from this lens and this experience has definitely influenced my career path. I and said earlier that I spent almost 24 years here at this one company. And some people would consider that to be highly unusual. It's like, I've actually had people say to me, it's like, when I was 10 years in, I was advised that it's time for me to find something else because you won't grow. So if somebody had told me 24 years ago, on the first day that I started here, that I would still be here 24 years later, I tell you, I would have told that person that they're insane, that nobody works for a company that long. But
Right,
there is a reason why I'm still here, and it's a very simple and profound reason. I was embraced as someone who belonged, someone who had a right to have my voice heard because it mattered. More importantly, when I faced racism at the most hateful kind within this organization, the executive team took immediate steps to eradicate the wrongdoer and not punish me, the victim. And I will tell you that that was a new experience for me. At the time,
yeah,
I was in my late 20s, and to have individuals that did not look like me rally for me when something so horrific happened, I knew I had found the place that I belonged. So I was
right,
proud and honored to be with this organization because they stood up for me, but not because it was solely for me, but it's because it was the right thing to do. you can't let hate grow within an organization because it's like a deadly virus with no cure. And if you
Right.
let it go, it will destroy all.
You know,
But
my brother is he likes to philosophize about things. He's not in the industry, but he always comes up with something. He says, "Who taught you?" And I says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "People were taught how to hate. That love is a natural reaction. But someone tells you that a black person isn't qualified to do this, a woman isn't qualified to do this." And he says, when you look through all our history, especially in sports, it was like, well, black people they can't swim. Well, okay, so they won the swimming title. Well, they can't play hockey. Okay, well, they've been playing hockey. They don't have the intellect to play pro ball. Okay, well, not only have they done that, they've excelled at 75% of the workforce per se, and yes, more than one black quarterback has won the Super Bowl or black coachings. So it's always something that who taught you that.
yeah,
So I look at DE&I as something that we learn, we unlearn, and then we relearn. Because what happens is when we understand what we've learned and throughout history, then we can say, okay, let's unlearn that. What is the reality? And then let's relearn and rethink how we think things. And that's why DE&I is a business case now. It has nothing to do with affirmative action. It has nothing to do with checking the box. It is now a business case, and businesses are looking at it from the shareholder perspective and saying, if we don't generate a diverse population and a diverse workforce, we will cease to exist. And I use the analogy: you either be not Netflix or Blockbuster. You can take your choice.
right. That's a good one. Especially during the pandemic, we knew which one was important.
How about it? Right.
Exactly. Switching gears, I want to talk about inspiration.
Hmm.
You know, when you think of the Black experience, your experiences, who inspires you today? And I'm guessing your brother is one.
Yeah, he's one. Yeah, I would say I have to say my grandfather was probably the biggest influence on me because he was always he was a big guy, right? Like 6'4", deep voice like James Earl Jones. You never looked at Grandpa sideways or whatever. If he said something, you jumped and did it. But he would always say, "Why are you coming here dressed like this?" Now we were in jeans at the time, right? Why are you coming here dressed like that? Because in his mind,
Yep.
and his father was a slave.
Yeah.
That's all they wore was dungarees.
Yep.
So in his mind, it's like, why are my grandchildren wearing stuff that slaves were wearing? You don't do that. And he would always say, well, it's something you can't do if you put your mind to it. I heard that ad infinitum, whatever. But finally, he challenged me, and he would say, I want to give you a project and see if you can do it. All right, so now here's the bet. You don't want to let your grandfather down. And so it was always those kind of challenges like that. So I think that, and then my mother incorporated the same thing. But I think the idea is that as a black person and growing up in the projects in Philadelphia, there was not an expectation to do more than where you were. And the thing that our parents told us, all five of us, was that, it's not where you come from,
Yeah.
it's where you're going. And so where are you going? Don't look at your surroundings as that's the end for where you need to be. You can go wherever you want to go. In fact, she told us kids, get out of the house, move somewhere far away so I can come and visit you. So that was her whole thing about that. I've had mentors along the way, and to your point, and not necessarily all of them were black. Some of them were white, some of them were women, and they influenced me in ways that stick with me till this day. And even in a leadership position, and there was one woman who I still look up to her, and she doesn't, and she keeps deflecting it. But I say, you set the perfect example for me, because when a mistake was made, you stood up and you said, you know what, I made this mistake, but I'm going to take it and move forward. And I said, who does that?
Right.
Who does that as a leader? So I think, when you think about it from that aspect, we're all the same, Renee. We're all the same. We want to have a good job. We want to make a lot of money. We want to be able to travel. We want to be able to spend time with family and friends. We want to discover new things. We want to experience new things. We also want to kind of be able to be who we are
Yeah.
without having to be judged by what we look like. I mean, I remember when I grew out my mustache and goatee at my job. I was there probably about 5 6 years, and I was told, you know what, you look sinister. I said, sinister? I said, sinister how? Well, you look sinister, like you're about to do something. I said, okay. So that was that whole, if they look at you by the color of your skin, they're 2 steps behind you. And
Yeah.
he's 2 steps behind me. I got it. I'm not gonna worry about that. But you have to. I think the black experience also teaches you that you can't be thin-skinned.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to ride the wave. Yeah, you're going to be the only one in a lot of cases, but guess what? Your perspective is what they need. They don't have that perspective. So yeah, you are the only one. Guess what? You own it all. But don't take the pressure of feeling that, as the only one that you have to live up to the whole standard, because unfortunately we do feel that way. But use it as an opportunity, and I think companies are changing their thought process now. 10, 15 years ago, and you know yourself, that wouldn't have happened. That would never have existed. What would have done is said, well, Renee, you kind of you don't fit the profile,
You're
and
out.
so you're out,
Yeah, you
and
don't
we
fit.
all right, and we always use the expression of get in where we can fit in. Um, and those days are gone now. Organizations are saying we want what you got, and we've got a lot of talent out there. I had one young woman who had 2 MBAs, Renee, 2 MBAs, and she could not find a job. And I says, okay, let me connect you with someone.
Yeah.
And now she's doing well. She's doing very well now. But she was only limited to the circle that she knew. So I would say that we need to expand our circle. Like you never heard of Maya, right? So my job is just connect the dots. I wanted to find out as much as what was going on there as possible. There's a National Association of Black Attorneys. There's a National Association of Black Accountants.
Right.
And at one of these conferences I was at, and the woman was looking at my badge, and it said, that was with this organization, and she says, "Well, why do you have to have a Black Insurance Association?" I said, "Because we weren't allowed to be in the regular association, so we had to form our own." And she's like, "That's ridiculous." I said, "You're right. That is ridiculous. We need to change that. You and I, we need to change that."
Yeah, and I will say too is that it's also about the mind. It's okay to say get out there, but sometimes you also have to get out of your own head.
Oh
Right?
yeah,
And this is
absolutely.
why representation really matters. I know that's becoming a cliche to say lately, but Anne at the beginning of this webinar mentioned my LinkedIn page and the research that I've been doing to highlight the excellence, and it's sort of merged into excellence of Black Canadian women, because I
Mm.
didn't realize I was looking for something to feed my soul and my identity. Yes, I'd never seen these women before. I never knew that they existed before, in high school and growing up in Scarborough, Ontario, Canada. So it's about being able to see that there is someone that looks like you that is actually there. And
Didn't
when
you
you,
just put one out there about the one woman who was leading the parliament? Um, I forget what it was. She started out. She came from Jamaica.
yes, yes,
Yes, that was an amazing story. I was stunned by that, and she got the highest order from the
yeah,
country. And I'm like, wow, what an impact.
yeah. I think you're talking about Clarita, and
Yes.
that's, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because majority of the women that I profile now have basically come from Halifax and Eastern Canada. So, and that makes sense because that was the end of the Underground Railroad for most of Canada. But really and truly, I just wanted to, sort of put a pin in it, which is the idea of representation is that if you don't see it, you can't be it. You don't even know it exists, right?
Right.
And so
Exactly.
I think this is the importance of why Black History Month becomes relevant, is that conversations are now starting again and again to highlight and speak of and indicate individuals who are out there that you may say, hey, there's someone that looks like me. I could do
Hmm.
it. And for a young person coming up in their career, I think it is a beacon that will get us where we need to go, which is allowing companies to bring in more diversity, because you won't be afraid to apply for those jobs, right? Because you've
Right.
seen possible. So it is a good thing, but representation is ultimately the key. For me, much like you, my family obviously is an inspiration, but I grew up in a time where, and especially in a country where women were to be seen and never heard. And I'm sure that's not unusual for a lot of women of a certain age. You get
Right.
past a century, and that is probably the language you grew up with. But I did have actually my grandfather, my uncle, who challenged me to be more, challenged me
Mhm.
to use my voice. And, my team can tell you that I'm probably the one person that they find very frustrating to come to with a question, because before I give them an answer, I probably have 100,000 questions more, right?
Right.
Because I like to look at a puzzle from all sides and then come up with what would be a logical and hopefully successful conclusion to the process. It doesn't always work, but it helps me to think differently. And that is
Right.
what my uncle, my grandfather gave me. And I will tell you is that when I immigrated to Canada and I became a minority, that silenced me for a very long time,
Mm.
because your identity as to who you thought you were being changed by others around you. And every time you negotiated left, right, or center, every angle that you navigated in, there was always this wall of identity that you could not reconcile as yourself.
Exactly.
So you
Yeah.
became silenced. And it's only recently, and I will tell you, Black Lives Matter movement was the beginning of when I decided to reclaim my voice.
Okay.
I remembered, and I was telling this to Anne and Tara, is that I remembered when the movement was at its height in 2020, and I am an individual that likes to walk through the city. I'd walk 15, 10, 20 kilometers because I love the city of Toronto. I think there's so many hidden gems if you just walk. Plus, it helps to keep my weight down. And I remembered walking along Yonge Street. Yonge Street is one of the longest streets in North America. And I'm going north on Yonge Street, and I can hear this sound coming towards me. And my greatest fear at that moment is it was going to be the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay.
Okay.
First you see the cops, and then you see like stragglers of people. And I started to actually panic as to what am I going to do? Like, how can I avoid this? Right. And I realized at that moment, I was actually afraid to express my own concerns. And we had these young people that were out there that were vocalizing on my behalf. And I was too
Mhm.
chicken to even do it myself. So
Right.
I decided to stand firm and watch the parade, the movement go by me. And with each passing wave of a person that passed my shoulder, I started to break down. And I started to recognize that for more than 30 years of my life, I have allowed myself to be silenced. And from that moment on, I have started to put together little grains of language that I want to represent what I have to say. And it started last year with my first LinkedIn page, and it's grown a little bit this year with this current Black History Month
Mhm.
endeavor that I'm doing. But it's just it for me. What is inspiring me are these young people who are willing to take up, the right thing for the
Yeah.
right reasons, right?
Right.
It's about fairness, it's about equity, it's about representation. And that's what's inspiring me at the moment. So that's
Perfect.
that story. I feel
Perfect.
like I sound like your brother philosophizing over here.
But it helps. It helps to have the introspection, right? And so
Agree.
you need to do that, and we all do. So that's all good.
I agree with you. So Robert, before we go, I want to talk about how we can build on allyship within our communities, fostering hope for the next generation. What would be, your take on that?
I would say that there are a lot of people who are already allies and they don't know it.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, having these open and honest communications, because it's not a matter of black people trying to take something away from white people. That's not what this is about. That's not what it's about. What it is about is the fact that we live on this one planet, and all of us are trying to achieve the greater good. Every organization has a corporate social responsibility statement of what it is that they want to do for their community and what they want to do for the greater good. That's what this is all about. Um, if you don't know where you come from, how do you know where you're going to go? So we have to recognize our history. And I love the way that Anne started this whole conversation about the indigenous folks who founded Canada, and those are the shoulders that every Canadian stands on, right? And really, when you think about that aspect, is that all part of the conversation? So I think that there's great optimism for the future, for the simple fact that we're even having this conversation
Yeah.
tells you that is, the timing is right and the information is out there. I use an example of my daughters, and I have three daughters, one son, and two of my daughters are like yourself. They were kind of sitting back, but they wanted to be vocal. And I said, well, mention something to your company about what it is that you're thinking about. But be careful when you do that, because when you start asking questions about why we're not doing X, Y, and Z, then they'll say, hey, why don't you lead that? And that's what happened to both of them. So both of them are leading the DE&I initiatives in their companies, their respective companies. But it's just it's interesting for me to watch them be so energized and so fired up about it. Dad, you need to understand, and they're running this whole thing down to me. I said, you're right. I'm going to use that when I have my next speech that I give, or the
Right.
next talk that I give. So we bounce all these ideas off. But I think that there is great hope for the future, Renee. And the fact that we have a lot of folks who are looking for change, and it's interracial, it's interfaith, it's intergender. It's not black people leading the charge out there and saying we need to make these changes. It's not the indigenous tribes that are saying we're out there trying to make these changes. It's a collective that's moving this thing forward. So I would say allyship, just get involved. I mean, if your company has an ERG, and maybe they have an ERG for women, an employee resource group for women. As a man, join and learn. You'll
Yes.
be surprised what you understand about that. If there's an LGBTQ group that's out there, join and learn. Find out about what it is that's going on. You want to know the experience? You want to know about the black experience? Join a black ARG. So I mean, those factors and things that are out there. So, and then embrace and enjoy the idea that we are all people. We're all people. We're all united in this, and that's really the bottom line.
Yeah, it is not a singularity. It really truly is about us recognizing that our voices, we're saying exactly the same thing. The difference is that we need to say it together in a chorus. It's like being in church. It's like we can all speak, but nobody hears. But if you sing, it makes beautiful music.
Mm,
Talk about ending on something cheesy. I
there you go.
apologize.
That's all right. That's all right. Can I give a shout out before we end? Congratulations to the Canadian women's hockey team winning the gold
Oh, uh,
again. Okay, and so Ann, I knew that I would get Renee on that because we talked about that before. But I watched it, and I tell you, women's hockey is becoming a lot more interesting than men's hockey. I'm just saying. But I was very impressed with how they did that. So just congratulations.
it's not just hockey. Come on now. Women in sports right now, they are
Oh, well, they just just here in the United States, so they just won their settlement for the soccer team, right?
right.
So they
Exactly.
$26 million. It's like 61 players who are going to get divide $21 million between them, and $2 million is going into a fund. But it's about time.
Oh, I agree.
It's
I
about
agree.
time. So yeah.
Seriously. But I will tell you, that game was at 11 o'clock at night. And I actually stayed up to watch it. And I will tell you, that almost killed me the next day at work because so I was up till like 1:30 in the morning, and I just like all pumped up too. It was an amazing game.
It was.
Yeah, good indeed. So I don't know if we want to open the room to questions now. I think we had a
Yes.
one conversation.
Yes, please. Before we do that, let me just say thank you. My goodness me, that went so quickly, didn't it? What a wonderful, inspiring discussion between the two of you. Thank you for being so open. Renee, you really opened up there and really showed us, your journey. And both of you are such an inspiration, and so many things really stuck with me. The action, Robert, a a framework doesn't move by itself. You need to act. You need to understand that there's a business imperative here, that it makes sense, that we're all human beings. Somebody, made a comment, we're all equal. We're all just looking for that to be open and, just allow us to have that same opportunity. But I admire your resilience and your ability to say you're 2 steps behind. Your mother and your grandparents must have been absolutely wonderful people to give you that confidence. You don't all have that confidence to say, to heck with you. So good for you for having that. And we all need to have that for sure. Let me see.
Robert, I see a note here from your daughter.
Yes. Yes, and she's one of the 2 that is very involved in their company, and it was so I'm just proud of all my girls. But those 2, after George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, they said we have to do something. And to your point, Renee, it's like they couldn't stand by; they wanted to do something. So, and so they did.
You know how brave it is to stand up, step forward, and say, "I want to do something."
Mhm.
And when I talked about that story about being on Young Street and trying to run from it because you're always afraid of the backlash. The fact that your daughters after that said, I'm going to put my hand up and I'm prepared to take the charge. Like, honestly, you've raised some powerful young women. You should be very proud.
I am. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a daughter. I keep
Well, there you
trying.
go.
Thank you for joining us, Jennifer.
Looks like we got some questions, huh?
Yes. So Tina Gardner, your fan base there, Robert asked, what's your proudest moment, Robert?
Wow. What was my proudest moment? So I'll get myself in trouble if I don't say when my kids were born and then when I got married. So just discounting those 2, I think I think my proudest moment was when they asked me to be the president of the Global Organization for REMS in 2018, because it allowed me to travel the world and to see how united we actually are, to meet so many people, but at the same time recognize that as the first Black president, it was a responsibility for me, and at the same time, I got promoted on my job, my day job. And my boss says, "Oh, great job! You're going to be president for RIMS next year. Oh, you're going to have to figure out how to do both." So I'm in India at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to handle conference calls here. But the idea that whole year, and having done that, I wasn't able to reflect on any of that until December of 2018 to think back of all that was done and the connections that were made and the impact that was made on the global organization. So I would say that that was probably my proudest moment, just being able to have that opportunity to serve, because not many people do. It's only been 65 presidents in a 70-year history. So I was one of, and the only one, but the first one, and so it was great. So I would say that was my proudest moment. Yes.
We're very proud of that too. You did. How can one, here's another question, Tara Lassard Webb, how can one be an effective ally, like an active ally?
Okay, is that for me or for Renee, or?
Well, both of you, maybe Renee, you want to start with that one? What do you think about how to be effective allyship? Anything that would be counterproductive? Interesting question.
Okay, so for me, I will tell you that being an effective ally is actually recognizing individuals for their individual worth, not about what you see as maybe colored by the lens of some sort of an ism, and whether it be racism, sexism, any of the isms. My career within this company changed profoundly because my reporting line changed. I originally was reporting to the operation side of the company, and then it moved to the legal. And the person who became our official first general counsel was and she immediately, my line changed to August to her. By the time I got to December, she was like, "I don't know why you're not a VP." And I said, "Well, I don't know if you know what you're looking at." right? And she's like, I don't know what you mean.
Uh,
I think, and this is really sad to say, it was the first time that I realized that somebody just saw me, like the effort of who I am as a human being, not what walked in the room as a woman of color, as a Black woman. And
Right.
that moment on, like, she brought the Women's Initiative Network in our organization. She sees the world where it's about effort and productivity and doing the right thing when people are actually giving you all that they give you, right? So I think allyship is about recognizing the value of the effort and not about looking at it through the lens of isms. Using your voice and your influence to make change. And it sometimes it's the smallest change that can be so monumental in a person's life. So reach out and do the right thing. Now, when it
Hmm.
comes to the what I consider to be counterproductive, um, there's a lot of things, and primarily it's microaggression. I find that moving the agenda forward when it comes to whether it be diversity, equity, inclusion, or any initiative that actually puts an organization in a right footing to be successful, it usually is sort of misaligned or thrown off course because of the sense the forever prevailing microaggressions that goes on around the process. It is as simple as whispering, it's as simple as innuendos, it's as simple as making a comment that's not grounded in facts. And everything that was built on the concept of moving something forward because it's the right thing to do becomes clouded in grayness. Like, Robert said, it's not about saying we're taking something away from white people. It's about what is it that we need to do in order to be here tomorrow. We need to be part of a progressive community world. The world is not just black and white. I know that sounds strange. And if you look at your community, you can see it's actually not just black and white. So how do companies be able to tap into understanding what it is that they need to do to service the people that they may not understand? So microaggression, I think, is probably one of the biggest tools of counterproductivity that exists in a lot of organizations.
Hmm. Yeah, and I would agree, Renee. I think when you boil it down with an ally is somebody who is from a privileged class that looks out for those who are not,
Yeah.
right? And so if you're a minority in a room, and let's say if there's a room of black people and there's one white person there or one woman there, um, and someone makes a joke or a crack or the microaggression, you know how they are. You know, you as an ally should be speaking out against those things. So that's how you can be an ally. You're just speaking out and standing up for those who are not in the majority group. That's the simplest way I can put it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it is always from the power dynamics, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of questions coming in, Anne.
Yes, one more question. I think then we'll have to close, although we could be here all day. And Robert, I'll start with you because you've certainly been a mentor for a long time. What have you learned through mentorship? So, I always describe mentorship as a two-way street, right? The mentor, the mentee, and you learn from each other through that journey. What would you particularly say you've learned through that mentorship role, Robert?
I would say that in a lot of cases, in mentoring people, you need to establish a contract between the two of you. First off, that's a contract of confidentiality, so that therefore what you two talk about is something that is between the two of you. As a mentor, you never want to put your goals on that person. You want to draw that person and find out what it is that they want to do, and then find ways to connect them with other people. I had a young woman who was in Central Oklahoma, and she wanted to get a job with a particular insurance company, but she was also moving east, and meeting up with her boyfriend there, and so there was a lot of things that were going back and forth, and I just kind of guided her for different ways that she can navigate through that whole process, and she was very successful in doing that. But I think the whole idea of mentorship is if you're a mentor, what are your reasons for doing it? I always go back to the why. There's always a why. And it's not for fame. It's not for, hey, I mentored 80 people. It's not about that. It's how are you going to give back from your lessons learned and help that person to move forward. And as a mentee, because I was mentored by people who basically challenged my thought process. Um, the first question that a person asked me is that, what's your plan? And I said, what's my plan? He says, what's your plan? Because I was getting involved with RIMS. I was doing things with that. He said, what's your plan? I said, I didn't have a plan. I'm just going to kind of go about doing it. He says, you have to have a plan. He says, you're here. What do you plan to do while you're here? Having a goal was one thing, but what's your plan? Now, my plan, nor my goal, was to be president of the organization. I thought that was just such a far removed concept. I thought that maybe I could just go ahead and kind of be the best I could in the committees that I served in. But then people watch what you do, and they watch your leadership, and they watch your organizational skills. So as a result of that, that's why you get promoted to do other things. So I would say mentoring is a great tool, but you have to be careful in how to use that. And if you find someone that's mentoring you and it's not quite working, don't continue forward with that.
Yeah, good answer. Well, I said that was the last question, but I feel I really need to address a question that Tanya Dietrich posed. Some of the deepest racism we face actually comes from within our own community.
Mm.
And she said, talk to me about what we need to do to overcome what is best described as that crab bucket mentality and emerge with confidence. That's a really good question. What would you say to that, Robert?
Interesting. What was the end of the question? The brown bucket mentality? Is that what?
Crab bucket. Yeah.
Oh, the drama bucket mentality. Yeah. So, when you're oppressed as a people, it's tough to rise above that. I've always surrounded myself. I have a lot of friends, but I have a very small inner circle. And my inner circle is very few people who will give me positive and negative feedback and kind of reset, my sail, so to speak. And my wife is, prominent among them. She's one of my best critics, but she's also one of my best supporters. And so when you have a small circle, they will tell you whether you're doing right or wrong. So you can't listen to the noise. But I will tell you, I've dealt with scenarios on my job where it's just felt like, I'm ready to leave. It's just so much. And it's only so much that you can take. However, you're the only one. So you are the one that's going to make the change. And guess what? You're going to make the change just by being there. And sometimes you don't even have to say a word because your presence alone will stand for that. So if you get caught in the whole idea of the drama and things that go on, reach out to someone. You can just look me up on LinkedIn. Anybody who's on this call, look me up on LinkedIn. Let's chat. I'll either help you out myself personally or direct you to someone who can. Because my goal is to connect the dots. And there's a lot of dots out there, and we can connect a lot of people.
Very kind and generous of you, Robert. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Joel asks, he says he grew up in an at-risk area of Toronto, and he says my education was something that provided me with an opportunity to elevate and build my career. I'm curious what some of the things were that helped you in your earlier days to raise you up and break the barriers that you must have faced, or did you?
I guess, well, okay, so I'll go back to my childhood. This is a wild story. I was not the person who was successful as a child. I was the kind of person who, if you said no, I would shut down immediately. And my family still laughs at some of the antics and things I did regarding that. But anyway, that's another story. But it took me a while to understand that when I lost my best friend at 12 years old, I lost another friend who died of suicide in high school. And it kind of brought to mind some of the things that my parents kept saying about it's not where you come from, it's where you're going. And I said, I can do better than the projects, but sometimes, you know, you're so tied in with your community that you feel that you can't leave. But we were always encouraged to do that. And when you have people around you that when they die on you, and I guess I was probably in my 20s, and my best friend, another best friend, died. And so to me, it was like, okay, you know what? You got to be about something. And and I think that's what kind of propelled me into it. And then getting into the workforce, working with some older folks who now I'm the rookie, and they treated me like a rookie, and so I got the brunt of everything that went along with that. But it was a lesson that I learned from that because they wanted to see if I really was going to be who I said I was going to be. I said I wanted to be a mechanic. Okay, we'll prove to you. You have to prove it to us that you can be. And so the same thing that propelled me into management was the same group of people where we're just talking about this foreman, but you know, just this guy, he can't do anything right. And he said, "You think you can do better than that?" I said, "Yeah, I can." So 5 years later, I'm the foreman. 4 years after that, I became the plant manager. And so all those things kind of said, you know what? My grandfather always said, "There's nothing you can't do if you put your mind to it." It all came back. So those are examples, and the things I tell people and folks on this call is there's nothing outside of your realm of possibility, but you have to put the work in for it. But you'll get there. And be careful for the things that you wish for because you're going to get it. And once you get it, and Renee can tell you, now you got to be responsible for it because I like, yeah, I want to do this. Oh, now you're doing it. Okay, so now you got to head that charge. So, but it'll happen. And the environment right now, and Renee talked about this, the environment right now is open and receptive to change. This is the best time. I told my wife the other day, I said, my company has made so many changes in the last couple of years. I would love to start all over again, but I'm getting near the end of my career. But it's just amazing of some of the things that they're doing. I'm just blown away by it. So, yeah, so those are all great things. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with
Part of
you.
the reason. Sorry, Renee.
Sorry, I was gonna say, I agree with you with that. It's like, as soon as you come into the phase of renaissance, is what I'm calling it. My company's going through a phase of renaissance. And I'm like you, I'm feeling like I'm on the back nine of my career. It's like, where's the retirement though? And now all of a sudden I'm jazzed up. Like I want to do. But then my bedtime comes and it's like, I'm just so tired at the end of the day.
Right.
So I just wish I had the stamina to say, I want to see us through this renaissance, but I'm excited for the next generation behind me. I mean, I have young people that work for me. I have my director of insurance, Vernon Matus, brilliant young man. Like, and I'm excited to see where he's going to take what I've built within this company. So yeah, I'm like you. I'm looking forward to that future, but I know, the door is coming for me.
Well, you're both extremely inspirational, and I'm sure you've inspired many of us today, along with your colleagues and your families. And let's keep this conversation going. I want to thank everybody who joined us today. Of course, I want to thank Renee and Robert so much for being so open and honest and, as I said, inspirational. Thank you, everybody who joined us. You're already active allies and, part of this and part of the journey. We just have to keep sharing and being active allies. Thanks for being engaged today, or the Q&A and the chats. It's lovely to hear everybody. Hopefully we can see everybody in the not too distant future. We want to hear your feedback. If you have anything else to say or questions that we didn't address today, please send them to me or Renee or Tara or anybody on the Owens board. If you have any other topics you wish us to address or dig into, we're open to all your ideas and suggestions as well. And I always forget, but I really want to thank James Eker as well for arranging this, for providing us all the promotion, technical support, hosting us. You always do that amazing. Thank you for that, James. And just again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It was just an absolute pleasure. And thank everybody for joining. Everybody do stay well and healthy and continue being active allies on this journey. Thank you ever so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care now.
Thank you.